Before we get started, I have an extra key to this game thanks to buying it before one was given to me by Mindthunk. You want it? Come to the Discord, go into the Knock Knock channel, and tell me your best knock knock joke. The only rules are it can't be something that'll get you in trouble for telling to a child or saying on live TV. Come get it, boyos! Hey everyone! I'm back after making a little pilgrimage to the meme pyramid to try and appease the YouTube algorithm. That most likely won't work, but what will do nicely is getting some more immersive sim into our systems. How about something with 1,000,001 ways to do any given task? Something that has stealth, violence, and combat vacuuming, and cat pictures, and I know just the game. Something tasty dropped right towards the tail end of my vacation. What you're seeing here is Ctrl Alt Ego, a game where you play as a disembodied consciousness on a seemingly abandoned space station. We'll get to the veracity of that latter statement in a while though. Meanwhile, we're going to have our souls leave our bodies every 10 seconds, which I didn't realize was a not normal thing because mine's been doing that since 2020. It's also some of the best emergent gameplay I have seen in years. This is one of, if not the best immersive sim I have played in years, which isn't so much as a clickbait for the title, although let's be honest, it kind of is. But it's also that Ctrl Alt Ego was so good, I briefly forgot about the existence of Cruelty Squad. And now that I really sit down and compare the two, Cruelty Squad is an excellent game and an awesome shooter with plenty of open-ended gameplay, but Ctrl Alt Ego is by far the better immersive sim. Also, yes, I have played Gloomwood's early access and nothing has changed about this statement. Ctrl Alt Ego is the best immersive sim I have played since Typhon, which in case you didn't know is what Prey 2017 might have been named before Bethesda's corporate meddling. Now let's get into Ctrl Alt Ego and why it's a great time. Let's take it from the top. You get a nice little tutorial that shows you that you are a cute little robot capable of murder, and then you wake up as a disembodied consciousness that's floating around a space station. You're being prompted to enter a cat, these little arcade cabinet style computers, and don't worry, there are other cats too. All the achievements have cat pictures for them, and there are selfie machines that you can possess that print out more cat pictures when you activate them. Your little bug robot even covers its eye sensors to shield them from the flash. It thinks it's people! We're getting ahead of ourselves though. Having no body turns out to have more advantages than setbacks. You are never truly killed. Just whatever thing you were hijacking at the time gets destroyed, and your main body, a bug, can be reprinted as many times as you want. It doesn't even have to be destroyed. Another benefit of not having a body is that you can phase through objects and get to be just about anywhere you need to be, which includes hopping across the map into the bug printer. If you've got no reason to lug your body across the map, you can just disembody yourself, fly all the way to the other end, and just reprint the bug at the other end of the map and go about your way. The start of this game is going to be almost entirely using your ability to jump from object to object, trying to get to where you need to be, and it requires a lot of creativity. A good example of how this works in practice is that if you're controlling a robot that needs to get through a door, you don't just open the door. Your consciousness hops out of the robot, takes over the door, you open yourself, and then you hop back into the robot and press on because a door can't walk through itself. The main reason you're going to be jumping around to as many objects as possible is ego. Ego is the embodiment of consciousness and also your primary currency, which is a little on the nose there. You gain ego either by picking it up around the station or hopping into an object that can't resist your influence. You expend ego to use it to take over things that can resist you, such as enemy robots or security terminals, or you expend it to buy some juice at the vending machine. Juice is very important early on because you don't have a way of getting it yourself unless you find pickups, and pickups are rather sparse. Juice powers all of your abilities, from your ability to jump and fly to your shotgun, cloaking device, and pretty much everything else you get. While we're on the subject of scarcity, ego can be hard to come by, and a lot of thought goes into what exactly you're going to take over and how you're going to get past a room. You could try taking over a security camera to either disable them from seeing you so that you can slip past the patrolling robots, or forget about going back to your bug body entirely and just hop from camera to camera all the way to the door and find something else to take over on the other side of the room. You can always just print a new bug when you need one later on. Need to turn a lot of robots into a lot of scrap parts? Well, you could just go in there with your shotgun and start blasting, but that's going to take most, if not all of your juice, making all your other items effectively, useless. I'll admit that normally I'm not too hot on a universal ammo system like here in Ctrl Alt Ego, but Mindfunk does a good job of contextualizing it in the world, and it makes sense from both a story and gameplay perspective. Alternatively, you could use some of your ego to take over one of the robots and use it to destroy all the others. An especially neat bit about having no true body is that every individual entity you can take over has its own health and juice pool, meaning that if you want to take over a dad robot and use it to disintegrate the other robots in a room, that's the dad's power and juice you're wasting, not your main bugs. That last bit is especially important because when something you're controlling has low power, it moves slower and it's harder to get away from threats when you're in that body. So using other people's power and juice is a very good way to make sure you have longevity in a level. But ego is only half the equation, if even that. Just like any good immersive sim, you've got a whole bunch of extremely exploitable tools and tricks at your disposal to make it through the space station and beyond. You've got the basic abilities such as flying around in a good old-fashioned shotgun, a shield generator that works by sapping power from other things around you instead of yourself, a teleport ability that lets you not just teleport but also appear in a different form at your destination, the ability to move heavy stuff with a tractor beam, a combat vacuum, and more. The best part about the variety of tools and abilities that is, aside from your hover ability, which is part of the tutorial in installing new programs, which is what Ctrl Alt Ego calls its abilities, you have access to everything as soon as you're able to install new abilities, and there is no wrong answer as to what build you start with. Every ability has a means to get you through the entire game and can be built up, used, and exploited to make it through the whole game quite easily. Want to sneak through everything with invisibility? Totally doable. Want to dump all your worms into the shotgun and just mulch everything in sight? You got it. By the way, you upgrade your abilities with worms, which are these little wormy guys hanging around, and you make this slurping noise when you collect them. It's great. Everything is not only possible in Ctrl Alt Ego, but it's a hell of a lot of fun to do. Now I hope you've gotten comfortable with the particular skill set you've cultivated, because every last room in Ctrl Alt Ego is a puzzle, and I mean that in the best way possible. Every room you go into has some sort of premise that you can work your way through using just about any set of tools. These aren't all roadblocks that you must do if you want to keep going, but more along the lines of challenges you can do to get more ego, or things like worms to upgrade your abilities, or memory boards that serve as more general purpose upgrades like increasing the amount of ego you get each time you take something over. It's not even just one puzzle per room. Areas have layers upon layers of little puzzles you can figure out, and all sorts of rewards or alternate ways into the next room that put you at an advantage. And yes, oftentimes one of those things is a ventilation system that you can exploit, because it would not be an immersive sim without crawling through a vent or 10. Mind you, this isn't even taking things like enemies into consideration. Well, yes, early game enemies like Mum and Dad are part of getting through rooms. This is more along the lines of finding slick ways to get yourself into closed off areas, or activating something that'll spit out a ton of ego for you to slurp up. I can't stress enough just how much player freedom you have to go about these puzzles and the main story tasks in the game. It's a marvel of design that every last room is done in such a way that there is essentially no wrong answer. And I don't mean that in a this is super easy type way. In fact, I had to take a few breaks during my playthrough because the little hamster in my head got tuckered out on its wheel, so I called it a day. It's more of a, every challenge in Ctrl Alt Ego is so complex that there are answers that the devs couldn't even think of or could have possibly think of, and all of it's valid. Here's an example that I'm not going to give too much context on since it's in the late game, but I'll summarize it as, you need to get into this room, but the door isn't working properly. Now, you could hover to just the right spot to get a line of sight for teleportation and slip inside that way, exploiting that you can go anywhere that you have a clear path to, even if that path is about an inch wide. It's going to be a big problem getting out of that room later on by this same method, but that's cool. You can just ego hop out of the room through the walls to the bug printer at the beginning of the level and just reprint your body at the start of the area once you've gotten all the goodies. But what if you don't have the teleport ability? Well, there's a dad in the area, and you can use your tractor beam to pick it up and move it over to where it's close enough to the door that it has a line of sight through the crack. Ego hop into the dad and intentionally serialize your bug and then regenerate it inside of the office. And if either of those tricks don't work well, there's always, the intended method of figuring out how to get the door working again. This is essentially the game. You are given a certain task that you must do, and essentially anything is fair game to complete it. Sure, you could just go about the basics and shotgun your way through the game, which I'll admit I did for certain parts early on as I was learning the rules, but then again, later on when you can combine the shotgun with other abilities for some crazy cheese strats, it becomes a fun way to go about things when, if you have a really huge hammer, it doesn't matter if anything is a nail or not. Just about anything you're given can be used in concert with anything else to get the job done, and all the little puzzles you find around the game act like little sparks of ideas to get your imagination going to make the most cheese-tastic things possible. Since there are essentially as many ways to cheese and Ctrl Alt Ego as there are possible ability combinations, times every last room or other area in the game, times all the ways you can ego hop into other entities, I'm just going to tell you a few of my favorites that I've done or tried to do so that you can get a feel for all the stuff you're capable of doing. Let's start with something that's not too far off the beaten path. If anything, this is entirely intended. Combat vacuuming. One of the abilities you can get which would benefit you for having early on is the vacuum. It's literally a vacuum attachment for your bug's arm that lets you suck up little bits of destroyed enemies and recycle them into extra battery power and juice. It's not particularly good when you first get it, but especially early on in the game, every last little scrap of power and juice you can salvage is gonna matter, and it gets a lot better as soon as you put a couple worms into it. But then we get into the other thing the vacuum does. If you right click while it's equipped, it'll use a short burst of suction to pull larger objects closer to you or quickly suck things in. However, if you just point it near the ground at just the right angle, the suction force is enough to send you forward with a burst of speed. You can use this feature essentially as fast as you can click. Now you can close the gap between ranged enemies that would otherwise take you down before you could get into shotgun range, and you can get so close you can drill them to death if you so desire. Which, yeah, your melee is like a cool drill like Bioshock 2. You can do all sorts of things with your newfound speed burst. Never mind that the hover ability also has a speed burst too. If anything, you don't have to commit worms to that because if you get really good at speed boosting with the vacuum, you don't need to use the hover speed boost. Oh yeah, and when used as intended, the vacuum can have it to where now you gain more energy than you expend firing the shotgun, and you can fire the shotgun as fast as you can click. On top of massive energy efficiency through sucking up little bits of fallen enemies, you also get the insta-jib ability from the vacuum, because one of its upgrades is creating more parts to be salvaged whenever you destroy a robot. So yeah, just you become the most powerful little Roomba in the world. It's amazing. I can't get enough of this. How about something a little more offbeat? You know how I mentioned that dads in this game can serialize things, which in case you're out of the loop here, means that it converts a physical thing into code and then stores that code internally until it needs to remake the thing into real space. Clear as mud? Got it? Good. Well, dads can do that with just about anything that isn't bolted down. This can be exploited. Anything includes large objects that upon being brought back into real space would do a lot of damage to anything they fell on. Also, anything includes exploding barrels, which don't have a traditional explosion here as we're kind of in an oxygenless environment, so I'll just, yeah, that'll do. Quick addendum to this, in between the time I played and wrote this script and this video going live, Mindthunk has indeed added actual explosion VFX to the game as well as a new voice for the executor. Go figure. So I know what you might be thinking. Serialize a bunch of stuff with Dad and then drop it on the enemies in the other room. Cool, but we can do better. Dads are stationary, so doing anything that would require keeping one over a long period of time that will require a lot of effort to move it around just isn't efficient. Plus, there's a lot of dads to be had, so it makes no sense to use the same one over and over again unless you are starved for the ego. Another thing that's apparent is that some dads are designed as traps and contain a subheading response team under them, meaning that if they detect you, they'll spawn in a bunch of enemies they had stored inside of them. Think you get off the hook by killing them before they notice you? Think again. If a dad is destroyed, anything and anyone inside of them will come shooting out in a big pile. This is where we get the idea for the dad bomb. What we do is serialize a ton of large, heavy objects, plus some explosive canisters for good measure too, maybe a bug trap if we've got them handy, and we get the dad in position. We can do this away from the area we want to utterly destroy, because so long as other robots don't see a robot that you're controlling do anything weird, you won't be marked as a threat. Then, using the tractor beam on our bug, we pick up the dad and yeet him into a middle of a room full of stuff that we don't want to exist. If If the impact damage of being thrown isn't enough, a quick shotgun blast will destroy the dad, and when the dad is destroyed, everything it had inside of it will come shooting out, including all those big heavy crates and explosive canisters we stored inside of it earlier. You might want to run the hell away before this gets to this part, because it could get ugly or really bring your computer to a crawl. Was that a little much for you? It's cool. There's always good old-fashioned explosive chucking. Explosives come in two forms in Ctrl Alt Ego: ether canisters and bug traps. Bug traps are essentially landmines coded to specifically blow up when a bug is nearby, because someone in the facility knows that you're the only one controlling the bugs. Lucky for you, they have ego receptors on them, which means you can take them over and disarm them. Or manually detonate them yourself. Even if you're inside when it blows, you're a disembodied ego. You can just hop over to the next nearest thing and continue on like nothing happened. So how do we make this work for our favor? Well, on top of just running into a room, chucking a canister of boom juice at something and then running out and repeating the process, we can also find ways to send explosives somewhere that we can't quite detonate them with our bug and then detonate them through bug traps. You know what's insane about these? Ctrl Alt Ego was made by essentially two people, going off what I see in the credits. Two dudes made this game with systems so flexible that you can do pretty much anything you can think of to get past enemies or puzzles. Notice that in those previous 3 examples, I didn't even include any like stealth tricks or using direct methods of combat. 2 people made this. This is clearly a labor of love for Mindthunk, the main dev, and I'm so happy he pulled it off. This game wasn't even on my radar till like a few days before it came out, and I hope you can see why I consider it one of the best immersive sims since Typhon. And we haven't even gotten to the late game or the story yet. Let's take a moment to get back to our roots. It's time for an anti-sponsorship. I've got one that's not quite what you're used to today, but especially noteworthy nonetheless. A while back, I was approached by someone offering to grant me money as part of a creator fund. They did all the usual things that someone trying to butter me up tried to do. Tell me how much they love my channel without mentioning any specifics that would imply they knew anything beyond my subscriber count and monthly views according to Social Blade. Talked about how they wanted to help creators like me, throw around big numbers, and name drop Mr. Beast. Now, I've got no problems with Mr. Beast the person, and I actually don't think I've ever even sat down and watched one of his videos. However, I find that there is a number of people that like to throw his name around when they want other people to do things they normally would not do without thinking too hard about it. Throwing around big cash figures is also usually a sign of a scam, but this was a little different. It turns out this was legit. There were even a bunch of news articles about this thing. I'm flattered that I was quote unquote chosen, or probably part of a big list, but after a bit of research, it turns out that they were essentially going to underwrite me for a business loan. A loan of at least $20,000 US by this person's telling of things. That's a lot of money, but of course it comes at a cost. The loan is through their bank, which they really wanted me to sign up for. I passed. I won't lie to you. Money is tight right now because I don't know if you've noticed, but food and gas prices have nearly doubled in this year. 20 grand is a lot of money. Admittedly, a lump sum of 20 grand would be more money than I've ever really had on hand at one time, and I'm sure I could do a lot of cool stuff to the channel with it. However, I'm not going to take it nonetheless. Sure, getting a lot of money is cool, and I could potentially do a lot of great things for the channel with that kind of money, but something like that comes at the cost of having to pay it back in one way or another. It was bad enough when I was scrambling to shit out videos I'm not proud of because I had sponsorships to fulfill, but it would be even worse if I was scrambling to shit out videos because now I have another $500 a month bill to pay down every month for the next 5 years, according to some quick and dirty calculations I ran. If I'm going to be beholden to anyone to make these videos, it's going to be you guys. Here comes the plug. I run a Patreon over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where I get the money I need to keep making videos on this channel, and I'd love to have you join it. While I gave traditional sponsorships a try earlier in this year, it just doesn't work for me and the kind of content I want to make, and I don't want to be beholden to any sort of corporation like, say, a literal goddamn bank to make my content. If I do this, I'm going to do it for the people who actually want to watch my videos. Any pledge gets advanced access to videos and exclusive update posts, and there's tons of other benefits at higher tiers like the recipes for the cooking segments, access to Q&As, and also I've decided that anyone who pledges at the yearly rate at any time in the year gets those cool Charlatan Wonder patches because, like the aprons I did for Halloween in July, I just love making stuff for you guys without having to deal with all that middleman crap. Speaking of which, we didn't do a cooking segment today because there are so many of you that pledged in July that I need to fit onto the apron that it's taking a while to physically embroider all of you onto it. But don't worry, by the time you're seeing watching this, all of your guys' aprons should be on their way, if not already at your door. In fact, a few people in the patron channel on the Discord have already posted that they got their aprons. I know the anti-sponsorship's been going on for a bit now, but stay with me here. As some of you might have figured out, I've actually been pretty badly depressed for over a year now. It started with some pretty extreme anxiety from an extremely bad living situation I blundered into, which was brought on by the pandemic, which now I'm out of, but my mental state never got any better, and my health insurance basically ignored me after my initial visit back in April of last year asking to be set up with a therapist. 18 months and a bunch of ignored follow-ups later, I finally got some out-of-network help, and I've been doing a lot better lately. Like, I think I'm genuinely starting to get better, and I'm so happy for it. I bring this up because in the meantime, you guys have been a great help in helping me feel better about myself and what I do. It doesn't matter if you're a patron or not. Just all of you showing up in these videos or in the Discord to see the thing I'm doing, despite YouTube's best efforts to make sure that none of you ever see my videos, means the world to me. And I can't thank you all enough for sticking with me even when I'm far from my best. If you want to support me financially on Patreon, I'd be more than happy to have you and ecstatic to share all the benefits patronage gives you, but in no way do you need to in order to be a part of this thing I'm doing. Just being here, watching the videos, saying hi in the comments or in the Discord when you're feeling it is more than enough, and I appreciate each and every one of you and cannot thank you enough for being part of this surreal journey we call making videos on the internet, patron or not. Now let's get back to Ctrl Alt Ego before I get too emotional here. Welcome to the late game. Sorta. I'll preface this by saying this bit is mildly spoilerish, but not like major plot details. Those come later and I'll mark them for you. So you'll be going through the game doing everything you need to confront the ego virus near the start of the game, and you'll be thinking that the game is a little on the linear side. Not like corridor shooter linear, but more like a BioShock the First linear, where you'll do a bunch of things in an area, move on to the next area, but unless you want to backtrack and use your stronger abilities to get some things you missed early on, there's no reason to revisit previous areas in the game for the story. But what if I told you that what you thought was going to be the end of the game was only the halfway point? You travel through one of the biggest areas yet to be seen in the game, and you need to cripple the ego virus, and then when you finally defeat the thing, which by the way, yes, you can indeed use your ego powers to take over the virus with your mind, the game takes you to a travel point and then opens the fuck up. You're transported to a new area that is entirely larger than everything you've been in up until this point, and it's completely open. You can tackle any one floor or any area in just about any order on your way to confront the big boss up at the top, learning the secrets of this whole ego consciousness thing in bits and pieces as you go. Dr. Everyman, the disembodied voice, has been helping you along from the start, who you can recognize whenever he's in one of the cats because there's an ASCII cat put on the screen, suggests that you go to the engineering area where he had his accident. But if you really want to, you can try out the cafeteria and security first, or the science lab, or tech lab, or even residential if you can get past all the stuff in the lobby and the entrance. This opening up caught me completely off guard, as I was thinking this was going to be a 6 to 8 hour game, but after this and the next area, I clocked in at about 16 hours according to my Steam stats. By the way, there's a whole nother area after you get through this area that's the size of the first third of the game, but now you get to go into space too. Just so we're keeping track here, there are 3 major areas in Ctrl Alt Ego. The bug-free zone, where we start, Conscious Robot Services, which is the big open concept area where we do some really crazy ImSim shenanigans, and finally the Cloud, which is where we can go into space and fight dads in zero gravity. The best way to describe it all is that the first area gives you plenty of freedom to play around with all your new toys while you're learning. It's somewhat linear and a little on the safe side, but you can have a lot of fun while you figure out the game's rules. Then you get to CRS, where the game presents you with a huge open-ended complex that allows you to attack it at your discretion now that you know what you're doing within the game's systems. And finally, you have the Cloud, where they give you ultimate player freedom. It is so open-ended, it's not even segmented off into areas, and you can literally just fly out the airlock through space to skip around and do however much or however little of the area you want. I think my playthrough only weighed in at 16 hours because I wasn't expecting to be able to straight up fly through space and skip most of the enemies and puzzles that are between me from one objective to the other. Because so long as you have a line of sight to something through a window, you can ego hop through a wall from space to inside whatever room in the space station you need to be in. Like, maybe I wasn't ready for that much player freedom, but I got it all figured out in the end. So what about the story that's been going on the entire time we've been finding new elaborate ways to stack boxes? Well, for the non-spoiler parts of the story, you are an unnamed ego that awakens in a place called the bug-free zone by one Dr. Everyman. Dr. Everyman seems to know a lot about the present situation and is very helpful with getting you where you need to go. He also seems to have enough control over the facility we're presently in to make sure that everything we possibly need to get out is there. But first we gotta take care of the ego siphoning virus in the bug-free zone. Then we have to deal with someone known as the Executor over at Conscious Robot Services headquarters so that we can ensure something like the mess in the bug-free zone never happens again. Then, once he's been taken care of, we can get to the cloud and break free of this whole mess. But some stuff is just a little weird here. Dr. Everyman supposedly invented the very technology that allows people to serialize their egos into code and then have that code be what runs pretty much every piece of technology from a music player to a train network. He essentially invented sentient machines by putting sentient things into the machines instead of the other way around. Why is this entire facility based on his tech hostile to him? Why is the Executor so hostile to us? Why does this ego virus even exist in the first place? What are the implications of turning a person's entire being into strings of code and running that code on a computer? It's spoiler time. Okay, like big spoilers here. Follow the timestamp if you don't want them. Also, I'm doing my best here to properly interpret the events in game, but it gets rather complicated, so don't take this as word of God lore. So we learn in CRS Tech Lab that Dr. Everyman had some sort of accident in engineering, and a lot of people, himself included, think that the Executor organized it. Being wary of an attempt on his life, Dr. Everyman copied his serialized ego into a branch version of the original program that is him. Excuse me if I'm not getting this terminology quite right. It's, I'm not the best, I guess, computer science brained person, but getting sidetracked here. So that in the event that he died, he would still be around in some form to contend with the Executor's meddling and his sciences. This branched ego is us. This is the player character. This isn't the first time Dr. Everyman's been branched off into two separate entities before though, either done by himself or by someone else, and it's not known if it was on accident or on purpose. Dr. Everyman's ego was previously split into another entity known as the Executor, the antagonist of this entire game. We see a few times in hints and other logs around the facilities that branched versions of the same ego or same program do not get along well, like two competing versions of the same program trying to run on one thread of a processor, or I don't know. This is suspect though, because in the Executor's office, as you can see here, there is evidence to suggest that the Executor was merely impersonating Dr. Everyman's ego. However, other evidence we find around other facilities hints that the Executor was a branch of Dr. Everyman that is so far back, maybe it no longer realizes that it originally was Dr. Everyman. Alternatively, the framing of Dr. Everyman could be a sort of preservation tactic to get rid of the other branches and therefore have the Executor be the true Dr. Everyman original program, whatever you want to call it. Also, side note, if this sounds confusing or if it's getting a little off track here, I've had to record several addendums to make sure that this is as close to correct as possible, and I'm not going to beat myself up too hard about this because at one point in the game, Dr. Everyman tells us that yeah, this is all very confusing and it's okay if you don't entirely grasp it. A lot of this is found through like bits and pieces and very easy to miss little notepads hidden around the facilities. For reasons seemingly only known to him, as soon as the original branch of Dr. Everyman is out of the way, the Executor releases the ego virus onto Conscious Robot Services and then all hell breaks loose. A lot of people have serialized themselves into egos in order to be better able to interact with a facility, and a virus that literally consumes ego is a very, very bad thing. Now, while a number of emails say that the virus was possibly sent over by some sort of scamster or even a competitor, there are notes about a Project Buttercup floating around the facility that essentially say that Consciousness Robot Services made this parasitic virus. And the notes we find make it a bit unclear how long the virus was in containment before the Executor decided to release it for whatever reason. While it was in containment though, Dr. Everyman seemed to have tinkered with the virus quite a bit, and knowing that the Executor was gunning for him, decided that his insurance policy branch of himself was going to have something that gave it an extra edge. It is made in part of the ego virus. We take over hostile robots and security systems by using our own ego to subsume theirs, and we gain ego by taking over lesser entities with no security protocols to defend themselves against us. Some of the user info sections in the menu even hint at this when we're inside certain entities, saying that we've completely overtaken whoever or whatever was once in this machine, and other machines that we can't take over hint at there actually being people or egos inside of the machine. And the Executor seems to be aware of the fact that we are possibly part ego virus too. He might even see us as Dr. Everyman's crowning achievement. He even tells us early on that when we come into CRS that we can't steal the technology here because we are the technology. We are a perfected form of the ego virus that is nigh unstoppable thanks to ego hopping. When we finally defeat the Executor and make it up to the cloud, we can go to an optional area which is straight up a museum to the history of ego, specifically not humans. In fact, people don't even know what humans look like at this point. It's revealed that Dr. Everyman did indeed send all of what was humanity leaps and bounds forward, but that was thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of years ago. Humanity as we know it is long gone. All sentient life is now ego living in God servers out in space. Dr. Everyman's actions with the original virus were considered to be one of the worst things ever done, as he had essentially created an unstoppable threat to all ego-based life, which was essentially everyone now. He was deemed too important to be straight up terminated though, so they put him in a sort of looping simulation where he could continue his work on ego-based systems without being a threat to everyone else. In the final stretch of the game, after feeding bugs into the consciousness uploader to destabilize it enough to let us in, we ascend into the operating theater where Dr. Everyman was first turned from a human being into an ego. It's the very beginning of this story, even if it's not where we specifically started. We've essentially looped back to the very beginning of the simulation, where we will eventually create ourselves as an ego virus to confront our other self as the Executor all over again. We're trapped in an eternal cycle where we are both the driving force behind everything that will happen, and we are also the figure that spurs this force into motion and the antagonist this force is working against. And oh god. Oh my god. We never left the cycles of guilt. This is all eternal suffering all the way down. We can never leave because without the cycle's continuation, we'll be trapped in an inescapable void. All we can do is continue to struggle to the next breakthrough and check if our legs are okay. It's all brosif all the way down. We made waves and we can't go back. We made waves and we can't go back. We made waves and we can't. Oh, sorry about that. I think I short-circuited for a second. Again, I do not know just how accurate all of that was. I tried my best to find all the notes, and there's not much I can exactly look up on Ctrl Alt Ego's story right now because, well, I'm kind of on the bleeding edge of this, and I think asking Mindthunk would be cheating. Anyway, let's wrap this bad boy up. If it wasn't clear already, I would 110% recommend buying Ctrl Alt Ego on Steam and playing it for yourself. It's possibly the best indie immersive sim experience I have ever had, and the fact that it's essentially two dudes making this is insane. It's fun, it's got a big, solid story with tons of stuff to do, and even though I didn't even get to them here, there are also a smattering of challenge maps to try out if you ever get bored of cheesing your way through the main story. I'll even go as far as to say that if I only had $20 to my name, and I had to choose between the two, I would pick up Ctrl Alt Ego over Gloomwood. No disrespect to what Gloomwood's got so far, as I've had a great time with the early access release, but Ctrl Alt Ego is a complete experience that plays to all the strengths of everything I love about immersive sims. Also, I can't help but notice that it's a month and a half into release, and all of immersive sim YouTube, everyone else is sleeping on this game. Guys, wake up! We're feasting in 2022. We've had Weird West, we've had Abermore, we now have Ctrl Alt Ego, and we've got a bunch of other early accesses like Blood West and Gloomwood. We are feasting, guys! We don't have to pretend to like other games now. Oh, I just remembered. Ctrl Alt Ego is going to be featured during Realms Deep, meaning this weekend it's on sale. Get at it. You have no reason not to get at it. You will enjoy this if you like anything to do with immersive sims. That's gonna do it for today though. Again, I cannot recommend Ctrl Alt Ego enough, and I hope you've enjoyed my video showing it off. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like and comment below. Also, I'd like to ask you that if you feel I've earned your subscription, to please also consider either following me on Twitter or joining the Discord, because unfortunately, thanks to whatever whatever weird algorithm hokey pokey YouTube is up to these days, subscriptions can be very unreliable even with that stupid bell that I have always hated because I think a normal subscription should be all that you need. The Discord's a pretty chill place and everyone there is nice if you want to come by and say hi. In the meantime, the Kenshi video, the playthrough I'm doing for the Kenshi sequel is at 150 hours right now, and I think I might need another 150. This one's gonna be big and I have no idea if it's gonna come out by the end of the year, but I'm excited to show you that as well as everything we've got coming for Indie Ween. So in the meantime, while I'm working on that, please stay safe, stay indoors, wear your sunscreen when you gotta go out, wash your hands regularly, and enjoy this cat video. Thank you so much for watching. Frisk, what you got there? What could this be? Is it the manual for my car? Which you seem very upset because I had everything open with lots of nice papers to sit on, but then I put it all away once I referenced what kind of inverter coolant I need, because that's how much of a dweeb I am. Chonkalis. Are you going to help me do basic maintenance on the car? Or are you just going to sit on the nice little booklet the manual comes in? Oh no, he's distracted. Mommy's walking around with tea. Can I trade you for a toy? You gonna go for it? Yes, I can put this away now.